Welcome to this week's episode of Marijuana Mind with yours truly, Dr. Justin Davis, and my ludicrous co-host.
Ludicrous.
Luda.
Luda. I love it. Okay. I think it's time to get you one of those word of the day calendars that we've been talking about for a while because you're running out of ways of describing your
Hey,
amazing.
no, I'm not running out. There's a million words that I can use.
Is ludicrous? That seems like out of this world, impossible, kind of crazy. Yeah, I guess that is. Yeah, you nailed it. Who am I saying? Yes, way to go, Justin. I am Luda. So, Justin, I know I always interrupt your intro, and
yes, I'm used to it. Everyone's used to it.
I know. I'm waiting for
another bad thing. It's our thing.
I'm waiting for another bad comment on Apple Podcast that says I'm a bitch.
Well, if you guys heard what she wants.
No, I don't.
That comes with being a woman online.
I cried incessantly in a corner for like a month and a half over that one, but she didn't get to me. But we have an amazing guest today. Her name is Jamie Toth out of Springfield, Oregon, writer, advocate, activist, and outspoken educator on the truth behind cannabis testing and science integrity. I absolutely love everything that this woman has been putting out into the public. It's stuff that I think that I want other people to say because I might not be able to say it, or I'm too chicken shit to say it. And so that is like you're like my industry idol as far as, talking about the good, the bad, the ugly of the cannabis space very candidly. And I'm thrilled that you joined us on the show today. So welcome, Jamie.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. And also I'm so happy that my work has, helped people feel a little vindicated about some of their own thoughts around cannabis testing and science. It's a frustrating time right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously working in the testing space myself, and Justin being like my best homie ever, I confide in him on some of the woes of running multiple cannabis labs throughout the country and the nuances of each market. But the worst thing is having to, bitch and moan to Dr. Davis about when we get fired for not being high enough on potency, or, having integrity does not pay your bills anymore.
It really, really doesn't. I think that was the most distressing thing when I learned about it. I kind of had to walk away for a few weeks and just take a big breath, because to find out that anybody who was actually earnestly believing in the science and investing in the science was going to get steamrolled by the industry because it's potency's king. It's really, really disheartening, especially as a consumer, because, we're depending on laboratories to give honest interpretations of what's going on. And when I cracked into the potency, it just opened up this whole big can of worms that I was not prepared.
I know it's the Pandora's box of secrets, but it's like the not sexy side of the industry, guys. Like,
it really is. Nobody is super turned on talking about testing, but I'm like, oh yeah, no, let's talk about some perfect testing results.
I mean,
and I took it to the extreme.
That's okay.
For me, I hear a lot of complaints in the industry about the potency problem. But for me as a physician, of course that's problematic. You want patients to know about the potency that they're getting so they can better gauge it. But that's not nearly as important as, are there heavy metals? Are there pesticides? I mean, that's the kind of thing as a physician I want people to really be safe from.
But don't you want them to be about the experience though, right? Because that's what benefits them in a medical program, right? Is how did you react to it with your ailment and this medicine together? Did it work? Did it fix? Who cares if it was 11% or 22%, right?
Right.
So if they're happy.
I thought you were contrasting that to the safety there, because you can't really, that's of course
it's all in one big. It's all in one big package, so I have bad news for you about heavy metals testing in Oregon. It didn't start happening here until March.
No, it's okay. I have a lab in Oregon, and
I know.
That is at least we're not Washington State.
Your lab is actually one of the labs I list when people ask me which labs I trust. So
Justin, did you hear that? Justin, did you hear that compliment on our
Yeah.
show?
I'm well aware of Keisha. I worked with them here. They were exceptional in helping support this little round robin I did in Oregon. But
That's so
the big thing
cool.
to learn was that you know, if they're willing to lie about potency, they'll be willing to lie about anything just to sell you some weed. So, that's the
Yes.
thing. If they're
And
going to lie about potency, they'll lie about heavy metals. They'll lie about micro. They'll lie about pesticides. And that's definitely what happened in Oregon. And they'll lie to you about being honest.
oh yeah, and then they'll blame the lying on the industry,
Yes.
the consumers that are purchasing high potency products only or
Yes.
that are asking for it. But the education piece isn't there. And I'll give you a good example. The other day, I went to go buy medicine at a local dispensary, I will not name. And I said, hey, I noticed you had this really cool pre-roll that I was super into because I like that gaseous, diesely, offensive kind of, fuel.
I get you.
So
Yeah.
I know what I like. I don't care about the potency, but the girl at the dispensary just goes boop, 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 and filters the highest potency first. And I said, wait, why do you do that? And she goes, well, these are higher. I was like, I didn't ask you for the highest potency. I said, I want the one that's going to be like what I want. Like she didn't filter by
Right.
she didn't even have the ability to filter by like all of the keywords I said. She went right to the
Terpenes.
highest potency. And I'm like, dude, like we've said in the past, I would fight a bear in a volcano for some Rude Boy OG at 11% all day, every day. And I'm proud to say that I smoke mids. And I want to
Oh, me
start a
too.
campaign that says I smoke mids because mids are accurate, right? Marijuana
Yeah.
Mind, we smoke mids.
I love mids. This whole thing started because one of my favorite strains was being discontinued by a farmer here, and it's
What
because I
was it?
couldn't push the numbers. It was Lime OG. It was
Ooh,
just this really nice limey. It was a nice creative. The terpenes were kind of lime cream, sort of like a key lime pie. It was
nice.
really great.
It sounds
And
delightful.
it really was, and it was grown outdoor. They were doing they were certified kind, and now they're Sun and Earth certified. I'm friends with them now. And I said, why'd you discontinue the strain? They said, oh, it just doesn't push the potency results. I'm like, what? The terpenes were perfect. You had the creative, it was chatty, it was fun, it was
Yeah.
delightful in a dry herb vaporizer, which is like my favorite way to consume. Yeah, it was a real bummer. And so I started thinking, well, why are potency results driving the market? And that's where all of this started, was my farmer discontinued my favorite weed.
They took my favorite weed away and I got pissed.
And I took that real personal. And I
I
decided what
I
was it that
sympathize.
did it? Yeah. And then it must be really difficult for you because your whole entire market is driven by this false perception that potency is king, that potency reigns everything about somebody's experience. And we know that it doesn't.
No, it actually really doesn't. Because first, to Dr. Davis's point, we assume all the medicine is clean because we have faith in the Department of Health or the regulating bodies that they said it's going to be clean. And then there's these like testing, everyone has to test. And so it's got to be clean, right? But that's not the case. There's been plenty of times on the, medical market here in Florida, I've purchased stuff that was not clean, but there's nothing I could do about it. I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't complain about it. I couldn't even return it. So I just have to swallow it and hope that somebody like yourself comes along and does this expose like you did out in Oregon, which I want to talk about a little bit because I can't wait to get Dr. Davis's perspective on it, because you did an article about cannabis labs versus cannabis science. And you highlighted Oregon's massive testing crisis and how it affects the consumers. And you were talking about, people losing faith in the science, which is something that is happening all over the country right now with cannabis testing. What made you, besides the fact they took your key lime OG away, what made you want to write about the testing side and not just write about the fact the grower took your favorite weed away?
Well, I have this long background in data and healthcare. So I was a data analyst, data architect in healthcare. And so for me, like every every problem has a solution somewhere in the data. And I knew that there was hard data behind testing. And so I thought, well, if I can understand, to me, I was looking to testing to be an answer. I thought that if I looked at testing and I looked at terpene results and I started to like look at people's like history and what they were looking out for and all this stuff, that I would learn more about cannabis. And so I wanted to understand that for sure, if I tested this, that what it contained was what it said, because I was seeking, cannabis medically to give me particular results, right? People do drugs because they work.
I love drugs.
Yeah, me too. So I do them because I want them to work. I want them to solve a particular problem. And testing was a way for me to get data, something that I could join with my experiential data about cannabis.
Yeah, you have an
And
analytical mind. And
I
so
do.
you want to see the numbers.
And then I started thinking, well, how reliable are the numbers? And I started digging. And that's when I started finding out. I found this study in 2015 of people starting to raise alarms about Oregon testing. And this was initially in 2019, late 2019. And I kind of wrote about there was a whole audit by the Secretary of State. And they came through and they said, Oregon, you have got some really big issues. And from my medical background and having a background in healthcare data and understanding laboratory from the healthcare space, I thought, well, I feel comfortable enough to like know very little, but expand a lot on laboratory. And what I found was a lot more surprising. I decided it would be as simple as just going and giving the same sample to all of these labs and getting everybody to test it. And then I would know, right?
Interlaboratory proficiency testing, right?
Correct. I'm like,
you can't do that here in Florida. No.
There's no reference lab. They don't allow you to do that at all.
They do not allow you to do that here in Florida. First, they don't allow you first. Not mandatory to show COA results of any product whatsoever. Not mandatory. Encouraged, pushed, nudged, not mandatory. Second, no reference
pressure.
lab. What was that?
And now there's peer pressure because a lot of them are. So
yeah, but at the end of the day, people are still going to buy the 30%, flower at blank dispensary without a COA than at blank dispensary with a COA. That's 15%. It's the transparency piece is not there because it's not mandatory to be transparency. It's really not necessary for your success of your company. 2, no reference lab to verify that the actual labs that are being licensed are putting out quality reproducible data. And then we aren't allowed to get samples from patients or third parties. We have to only accept them from the people that have inquired. And it has to be their medicine. They can't submit medicine from another MMTC. And patients can't submit medicine. Doctors can't submit medicine. And even when the state does get their lab online, which will be shortly, they can't punish laboratories for doing nefarious things because we have an ISO and they haven't got theirs yet. It has to be, I know. So welcome to Florida.
Wow.
Dumpsterfire.com. And now knowing what you know about Florida and what you can and can't do, I think we learned something from what you did, or the MSOs made sure that language was not in there because what you did talking about this, I remember in 2016, Oregon had the strictest testing laws in the entire cannabis industry. When they went adult use, they got stricter than when they were in medical specific and only. And then it took until 2019 for this audit to happen.
Yeah.
For them to spot.
But Jamie, I want to clarify with you. I mean, It makes sense that the labs would fudge data and that would get them business, and that the growers would want the data fudged that would lose them business or contracts. But why? But you sort of intimated that even things like the terpene profiles were inaccurate. So unless they just had poor testing, I guess, techniques or equipment, why would something like methods, why would something like that be?
I don't think that terpene profiles have been inaccurate. I think that pesticides definitely have, and there actually has been a stipulated settlement in the state of Oregon against a laboratory that was passing cannabis for pesticides when they were incapable of doing the test.
And the reason is for that one, I looked into that one specifically. I knew we were going to hit on it, is because they're up until a couple years ago, people were always testing pesticides on the same instrument, the liquid chromatography mass spec, which is LCMS, not realizing that certain types of pesticides that are volatile have to be on a GCMS, gas chromatography mass spec. And because if you're going to test everything on an LCMS, the volatiles are not going to be detected. So you're going to do a false pass without knowing confidently that those are not present because you can't see them. So you have to test it on an instrument that can see them. But that was not known. And it wasn't actually mandatory until like maybe last year by like 1 or 2 markets. And so they were just like, well, just whatever method you've got, it's fine. Just use,
it's good.
There's no standardization in testing methods, which is why there's so much deviation. But
well, and I asked, so I kept seeing this thing pop up, TNI certification. And I was like, what's that?
Fancy.
And so I looked into it, and it's the NELAC Institute. And I talked to this person at the NELAC Institute, and I'm like, well,
how'd that go?
Disappointing. So the NELAC Institute are the people who certify ORLAP, which is the certifying body of labs in the state, just to tell you who they are. And so I talked to them and said, oh, well, do you have any say as to how labs standardize their testing? Specifically, I was interested in standardization around the standard.
The reference standard?
The reference standard, which I was totally fascinated by as a concept. And the guy, no, they don't do anything like that. He basically said TNI certifications, basically, they inform you as to standards. They hook you up with some peers in the areas that you test in to make sure that you're comfortable with the standards. And that's
suggestions, introductions, and trust.
Yes. Yeah. And I said, well, do you have any way to catch if somebody's being a bad actor? And he said, no. And I'm like, well,
we're not supposed to catch the problems. We just introduce the people and connect the rest of the yeah.
How would that meet the strict standards set forth by Oregon?
Oregon actually does not require an ISO accredited. Like, wait, they do now.
They do now.
Back in the day, they did not. Like ORLAP, ORELAP was sufficient for a third-party body to verify if the lab is competent and capable of running tests. We have ISO 17025. I just went through an audit the other day for New York. They killed it. Shout out New York. Way to go. But they had really strict, meaning they had a very comprehensive list of banned analytes, both in solvents and pesticides, comprehensive and very strict heavy metals action levels and protocols, and then micro. And they don't really focus on potency and terpenes, but they actually had at the time in 2016, they had a very large list of contaminants that you could test for, that you have to test for. And that was unheard of. But I mean, why do you think Oregon implemented such a strict protocol in 2016 with an adult use market, knowing that there's more people going to use it? But why not with the medical market?
Well, it's really weird because the medical market they don't have any kind of protections at all for medical patients. It's a bit disappointing as a medical patient because it's like, well, I would like to make sure my medicine's safe. I think that they were so strict in the adult use market because they really wanted to be an industry leader, and they thought that leadership was going to be in creating an industry around labs and lab testing and creating meaningful testing that would protect consumers. And I think they just got heavy-handed initially and then didn't understand the actuality of what the work was going to look like, because ORLAP, in their defense, is a soil and water testing. They're not used to testing, drugs or drug potency, and now they've got psilocybin on their plate as well, which is a bit nerve-wracking.
A little bit,
a little bit. And so they just don't have that kind of expertise there. And so I think that they were just like, well, we need to make sure that people are safe, and this seems like something that is reasonable, right? And then they found out, oh, you were heavy-handed here, not heavy-handed enough, like not to have microbiological testing or heavy metals testing until late in the game. Is really disappointing from a consumer safety standpoint. Their sampling going back from a 15-pound batch to 50-pound and calling it for consumer safety is also, I mean,
Oh,
that's a look.
you get, and Oregon growers get to pull the sample.
Correct. They own the chain of custody. I mean, they can just be
Yeah.
like, yes, this is what you're sampling for me today. And there's also, I've heard when I started writing about this several months ago, so I really started writing in earnest last December about it. I've had people contact me from labs, from farms, telling me what behavior they've been asked to engage in, what they've done, I had a list of like 8 or 9, I think 9 ways that labs cheat.
Yeah,
That
I
was
read that. And actually every single one was valid. You missed one though. You
Oh
missed
no,
one.
which one?
Dry labbing.
Oh, what's
Like
that?
the activity. Okay, so what she's talking about is
This is a PG show, right?
like, shut up, Justin. What she's talking about is that there are certain things that laboratories have decided to do. These are decisions that they make on their own internally to either
Procedural
gain market
decisions.
share, make money, sustain life if they're not doing well. Either the market's saturated or they want a bigger piece and they can't because they don't have the highest potency. So they have to get creative and they drop their integrity piece. And then they start coming up with these like 10 items, like you had said, on how they can manipulate or enhance the data. And so I'm going to go through just a summary list: the sampling, spiking, calculations like dry weight calculations, calibrations, using known values, using the wrong weight input, and then trusting the lack of enforcement. The one that I didn't see on there was dry labbing. And dry labbing is a term for when laboratories don't even run the test. They just take, hey,
Lovely.
I laughed too until I actually looked into it specifically in the Florida market, because when you take the amount of volume of samples that certain laboratories that really have this market cornered, how many samples they'd be taking in because of the amount of clients that they have by a week, and knowing the instrumentation in-house and doing the math on run times and all of that, it would be impossible for them to run that volume of samples with their timeline that's dictated on their COA as being like 48 hours.
Oh no.
And that
I
is
get
what
it.
So they're not actually running all the tests. And this has been in other markets too. They're actually just taking data that's already in the instrument and they're copying it over. And I noticed when there was a COA that had the same water activity, quantified, moisture content, and terpene profile for almost 100 clients in a row, like different clients.
Wow.
But I gathered all these COAs and I was just looking, I was like, wow, what are the odds that they all have the same exact values for all of these things? And of course, everything else is non-detect.
Of course.
Sometimes we affectionately call her Nancy Drew, by the way. Now
That's because I have a problem. And
I
know
get called
that.
a pit bull. I get called a pit bull. I just have to know. I can't let it go until I know.
Well, okay, I can see that. So I mean, yeah, I want to know what's going on because it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not a chemist, obviously.
Me either. I'm just
I'm
a
not a
writer.
scientist either. I have
I
nothing.
sew.
Oh, I see that. And I don't even sew. I do like the binding tape sometimes.
That's cool.
Justin he's a man of many arts and many talents. And I have like very little talent, but I work in a lab space, which is a very out of my element. And I want to make sure I understand the industry so I can play the game. But this is not a game I can play because everyone has their own rules and everyone is going to have their own tricks. And I don't even want to be on the same field. So
Well, it's a twisted game too. And like
it's dirty.
What's really gross, so like all of my articles focused very heavily on the labs, but you know, when I tried to put it all together, you know, cannabis labs versus cannabis science, there's a lot of cannabis industry versus cannabis science that's in there as well, because as a farm, to get a report that says that your cannabis is 46% THC, you know that that's wrong.
They're canna stupid. And sometimes I feel like the consumers are canna dumb and they need to be more canna conscious, but
yes,
logically,
biologically, yeah, biologically,
is it possible for a flower to be grown, the cannabis plant, okay, to be grown with an excess of 40% THC. And that's factoring in the mass of the flower, right? And saying that.
Yeah, it's a big
Is it
ask.
possible?
And no, it's from my understanding, from what I've talked to farmers, I've talked to scientists, I've talked to lab technicians, and I've talked to some harbor statisticians who are working to publish data and data sets about cannabis labs and cannabis science. And all of them say that around 36% is biologically infeasible. Above that, and you're looking at results that are a little bit nuts.
Right. So I'm going to tell you now that in the event, so recently, and this is the kind of the segue, and I know we're all over the place with your article, but it's funny that you say this because recently, as of the 28th of October, there was a lawsuit that's going through in California, and it is in Monterey County, Santa Monica, California. You were actually quoted in that.
Really?
That's where the full circle came from. I was doing my research on you, and then I got this lawsuit, and I'm fairly certain they quoted your article. But okay, so the lawsuit, let's just get down to brass tacks, is Greenfield Organics, which manufactures a product called King Rolled Products. These products are known to have very high potency, but known not from the analytical side, but from the packaging. Because the packaging says they're very high in potency. Trust us. Look at how high our potency levels are. They're advertising 47.5% for pre-rolls, but they do say very clearly that these are enhanced pre-rolls. So enhanced meaning they took a standard cannabis plant and they either added a solventless extracted material like kief or hash, or they spritzed it with some distillate or rolled it in some, concentrate. So they take a regular potent flower and they enhance it. They say that very openly that that's what they do.
But if they tell you they do that, that's legit, right?
No. The lawsuit isn't about them enhancing pre-rolls, because they did 100% disclose that they were enhancing these pre-rolls to this 52% product that you were buying for this price because it was enhanced. So they weren't lying about where they got the potency from, because it makes sense if you enhanced it. What the problem was is when they went to go test, somebody had done a test of the product that was labeled at a high potency and realized it was like 33%. So what they were doing is they were advertising it significantly higher than the allowable deviation of 10% that California allows for a product label to deviate from, which is up or down 10%. So this was significant difference. And the gentleman who purchased it felt like he got taken advantage of. And so they are actually they filed a lawsuit about unfair competition, false advertising, Consumer Legal Remedies Act, negligent representation, etc. And they talked about the inflated THC being financially driven as an incentive because the gentleman paid more for that 48.54 infused product when it turned out to be a 31%. And
crazy.
So in this case, unlike others where they advertise a 35% flower, not enhanced, and it comes out to be a 19%, they could very easily go and say, well, the lab told me it was a 32%.
Right.
So plausible deniability.
It built in all this plausible deniability, just like the retailers have the same plausible deniability of, well, we know this. But here's the thing that got me about the retailers.
Oh, I love the plausible deniability counter arguments.
Yeah,
go ahead, please.
Because it all works until you do a little bit of blind testing, right? So I called up some retailers and I said, hey, could you tell me what your highest testing flower is? I want to drop in and buy some. And luckily this was during no touch COVID, so it's totally normal for somebody to make this call, right? And they would say, okay, well, it's this. And I'm like, can you tell me who tested it? And 9 times out of 10, the person working the desk would then launch into issues that they had around testing. And then I would say, oh, well, it's really funny because I'm a writer and I'm actually, doing this whole thing. And it would turn into, well, I have a lot of doubts around testing too. So, I don't think, you either are a cannabis professional and you know that these things can happen and you're aware of this stuff and you're actively fighting it, or you're not.
Yeah. Because anybody who tests a product and they're getting, let's say it wasn't this lawsuit with the enhanced, because you can't enhance anything in Florida. So let's just say Dr. Davis's dispensary in Taqueria, okay, just hit the Florida market, huge, popular, okay, but not for your potency. You're popular because you offer tacos and weed together, and that's why everyone loves you, right? So
Mhm.
if you decided one day to get a higher potency, your patients are asking, I want a higher potency product and you'll have more of my business. I wish it was higher. Well, you find a lab that gives you the higher potency than the lab that you had that maybe keeps their integrity, and you use them until one day you get busted for a blind test and it turns out that your taco OG is actually 19% instead of 35%, and you turn and you say, well, that's what the lab told me. Well, then the argument goes, why were you using the lab to get these high numbers for so long? And then you blame them, which means you're putting your entire product line, since using that lab, up for scrutiny. And you're legitimately going to blame, they feel like that's the easiest person to blame would be the lab because of the data, but you sought out the higher potency by lab shopping. You can't turn around and blame the lab because they're going to come back and say, well, you paid that lab for this amount of time for this amount of products.
I don't 100% agree.
You don't think that it's a two-person game? It takes two
It
to
well,
tango?
the problem, and we talked about with Hancock, right, is that the labs are dependent on getting business from the grower or the consumers,
And the
the
grower is
buying
dependent on
consumers.
the results being high to make money.
Yes. And so
It's a
and
reciprocal agreement that
it
even said
is,
or unsaid.
but so there needs to be there needs to be the testing of the testers. So
Yes.
right.
Verification of the
Yeah,
laboratories and data.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then secondly, you need to take it away so there's no direct relationship where you can just lab shop and get the results that you want, and the labs are pressured to then give out your quote
Oh,
unquote
yeah.
your good
Trent
grades.
and I are working on legislative language that we'll have to do like a pilgrimage across the United States, spreading our love and smoking our weed. But we have language that will close that loophole. That I'm ready. I'm keeping it close to the vest because I don't want someone to exploit it. And I don't want some company to say, oh, we're going to introduce this with our lobbyists and we're going to look like the heroes.
Right.
There is a way to fix this problem nationwide, and it's not even that difficult, and it's not hard, and it could be implemented tomorrow. And
That's
it would
awesome.
make the relationship between the lab and the grower not based off of any type of financial gain. I mean, it's almost like an even disbursement of the compliance samples among talented and competent and equal laboratories. But
That's awesome.
it gets a little more intense, and when it comes out, I hope it gets well received. But the one thing that I liked that you definitely hit on was about subcontracting with
Yeah.
laboratories. Not many
Yeah.
people know about that. So tell us a little bit about your understanding of subcontracting with laboratories in Oregon.
Yeah, so I come from a medical world, and so I understood, medical tests from like the bench out, not from this crazy world of subcontracting labs. But here's what happens. So you have a lab and it only has, say, one type of machine. It can only run one type of test. Say that test is potency. They subcontract all of the other tests that they need to meet state compliance to another laboratory.
Mhm.
But why
That
wouldn't
gives
the
them,
client just go to the other lab that has all the testing?
isn't
Why
that funny?
split it up like that?
Hmm,
What
I
could they
don't know.
do? How would they
What could
benefit by
they
splitting up
what could
subcontracting?
they possibly do? Well, I can tell you the one lab that I tried to ask about this that was particularly they were not kind to me.
That's not right. That's not nice of them.
Yeah, but I was trying to understand, like they basically only ran potency tests. And I'm like, what's the longevity? Is there a long-term goal for you to acquire other equipment to prop
Yeah,
up?
what's the plan?
And they were very unwilling to talk about what their long-term plans were because I don't believe that they had to have one. Their plan was
Oh,
perfect. They could run potency and have somebody else run pesticides. And so I had this instance where I was trying to get these labs to stand up against like the bad actors. I'm like, come on, just tell them like,
yeah,
no, stop lying. You're
yeah,
being lied to,
you're being a
consumers.
liar.
Yeah, and you're being a filthy cheater. I tried to get them to stand up for themselves, and it was very uncomfortable for some of them because they had subcontracting with the lab that everybody openly accuses of cheating.
Well, so for instance, for listeners and stuff, if a product that has to be submitted for testing for compliance before it can be sold has to go through a certain, panel of tests for contaminants and potency and such. And a lab chooses, because the states that do licensed laboratories that have a medical or adult use program do allow partial licensure. So you can have a license to be a lab for just potency, or maybe for potency and micro or whatever. But this full gambit still has to be done on this product. So arranging for another lab who maybe doesn't have that relationship with that grower, maybe didn't get that inside, meet up with that grower,
Good deal.
sees this as an opportunity to generate more revenue and not have to do the sales piece, and so they will then get the sample from the lab with about 2 talents, and then they do the rest of it. But what I wanted to know, and this is something no one really can tell me about subcontracting, is like, who is the responsible party at this point? If I subcontract out a micro test to another lab, how, and it fails, and who's issuing this COA document? Are you getting 2? Are you aware that the subcontracting was happening? Are you getting one ISO document from one place for the stuff they only did? Is it a Franken document, which would be a violation of their ISO or ORLAP?
That's
How
an
do you pay?
interesting question.
These are all my questions that I can't seem to get answered, even in the market that I'm in, because no one's actually done it before. And we
I
do
can.
all of the testing, and we have 2 labs. So if one can't do it, we got another one to back up. But I'm curious about how this all goes down. Who's the responsible party if you want to challenge these results?
I bet you I can get the answer. So what I've done with the state of Oregon is, because I have that data background, right? So I asked them for just every single potency result that they had since 2018
That's what
until
it says. You did a public records request for
a
all of that
massive
info.
one.
How long
Yeah,
did it take to get that?
a couple weeks. Like they took as long as their laws allow. So Oregon's laws are very interesting. They have very good transparency laws. As a consumer, I can ask for a whole bunch of information.
But you have
and
to
get it.
ask for it.
I have to ask for it. They
Florida.
won't just publish it. Florida is I'm trying to crack them next.
Oh, very, very strict public records law. If you ask for it, they can give it to you sometimes ish.
Sometimes ish. They seem to be really
You
squirrely
have to
about
be
what they're
very
willing to share.
specific. You have to be incredibly specific, or else it'll be too broad and it'll take them too long, and then you're paying for their salaries. I'll help you with the sunshine law.
Yeah, I used to work as a data stakeholder. So I was the kind of gatekeeper for healthcare data and health insurance. So I was the gatekeeper for like 3.5 million patients' records. So I used to be the person who would say no to requests all the time. So I'm pretty good at writing a request that somebody will think, oh, that's innocuous, I'll just fulfill it. That's no big deal. And so what I asked them for was, I don't want to know the names of the laboratories. I just want it de-identified. I want lab 1, lab 2, lab 3. I just want the potency, and I want the date. I did go back and ask them for more information to try and see if I could suss out if somebody was actually performing lab shopping.
Out.
And I did. I requested that they send me strain name, farm name, lab, and they took as long as the law would allow once again, they gave me a data set. And I can tell you there's definitely some lab shopping behavior.
Of course.
Yeah.
Why would the state though not be? It seems like they would be happy to give you that information because you're actually helping the people of the state. Why,
They're
why would
quite
they want?
The
Why
they
would
were
they?
optics
quite
of it.
happy. They were
The
quite
optics
happy
are kind
all
of
the way.
iffy.
Yeah.
Because the OLCC, which is the regulating body for Oregon, the OLCC is in charge, just like the OMMU and the DCC and the, CCC, all these different cannabis regulating bodies by market. They're in charge with implementing a safe program successfully and efficiently. If for some reason Jamie Toth comes along and wants to request this info, well, what's she going to do with this? What is she going to see that we didn't see or that we didn't catch or that we chose to ignore? And then how public is she going to make this info, and how much of a pain in the ass is she going to be to our success and the
So they should
optics
just
of our program?
hire her very quickly as their consultant.
Yes,
And then it's like they're brilliant because they have this brilliant consultant.
they should do that, because most of the people that work in these divisions are not scientists that have dealt with cannabis. They're just
Well, and a lot of
people
people-
assigned to the program when it starts.
And they're not data people either. Like they were handed basically a system with Metric. It wasn't particularly made to do these reports. Metric wants to make these clients come pay them to do the reports for them. Like, everyone's financially motivated by something in this situation, and all of it's against the consumer. And that's what made me angrier. The more that I pulled this data set, the more that I looked at it, the more that I saw well, obviously, a dispensary should know that this 46% cannabis, I literally bought 46% cannabis flower,
Ooh,
not enhanced, just 46% off.
you're
the
so
shelf.
lucky.
I was so lucky, and I published pictures of it. It is the gnarliest looking stuff. And I had it tested by a lab that I trusted, and it was like 33% or something.
Just still, you should be proud of 33%.
That's really high, actually.
That was my argument, was 33% is really amazing. It would be great if they just marketed it as a 33% cannabis, and instead it just tastes like lies.
Yeah. Lies,
Gross.
deception.
Lies, deception.
This cannabis
greed.
tastes like lies. That's going to go on the back of the I Smoke Mid shirt. Your cannabis tastes like lies,
Like
and
lies.
smokes like deceit. So I love that you know exactly what you're, I think a lot of patients don't know what their rights are or what the capabilities of their them being a user in the program or just being a citizen in a state with a program, that you can ask for this information.
Yeah.
California and Arizona and Michigan are very open with their programs. If somebody gets in trouble, they will put out a public or a PR about it, press release. They'll say, we just totally, busted this lab for manipulating data. Love Michigan, and California the same. We closed down, we suspended this license, we did this. Look at how active we are with monitoring our program. Other states are like, we're not going to disclose anything, and we're not going to talk about it. And they're going to have to do all this paperwork to get the info. But I mean, with transparency, there comes trust, I think.
Right.
And I think Michigan's been a great market about holding people accountable. Arizona too. And California's had their ups and downs, but they're starting to standardize the testing industry. They want to standardize the testing. So one question I've got is, when you were doing this interlaboratory proficiency where you sent the samples to all these different labs, so you got 8 different labs to participate in your investigation. First, how big was your sample size, out of curiosity?
So there were 20 total labs in Oregon. Initially I got 18 to agree, and then 8.
Well, because some labs, they're all on board for transparency until you're like too transparent.
Until I said, okay, well, I have samples now, and I acquired samples from, friendly farmers. I, had a whole thing. And once I had samples, 10 of them dropped out and said, well, we're not interested in doing it anymore. We're not interested in participating. The people who had been accused the most of cheating never participated. They wouldn't even answer their phone. And I used the phone that they registered with the state. I used the emails that registered with the state. I sent them like snail mail letters. These people did not respond. I gave them every opportunity. So I thanked the 8 participants. I sent them all samples. I had 3 flour and 1 distillate that I sent to everyone. I had an idea of known values. Flour A was a very high scorer from like somebody who
I
likes to
saw
push
that.
the limits. This dude loves to push the limits of cannabis. His name's
Is he a boutique grower or like a craft grower, small batches?
Shango.
Okay.
Shango.
So we've talked about this
Multi-state operator.
Oh, he's a MSO?
Yeah, he's a multi-state operator, and he has in Vegas and in Oregon, but he's like, his name's Shane McKee, and he's like a space and genetics geek, like totally into cannabis. And I asked him if I could use his strain.
I mean, I am space and genetic geek too, because cannabis space centers right there. Anyways,
right.
Okay. We've talked in the past about genetics being, or cannabis being so easy to grow, because I've done it before, and a couple of plants I did very well in my very first time, and I sang to them, and they had AC, and I light cycled, and I played music, and I did really, really well. And everybody can do really well. Cannabis is not difficult to grow, but when you scale cannabis up in a steady
Absolutely.
or rapid, that's when you start messing up. That's when the potency suffers. When you stuff all these women into a room and you take shortcuts and you don't give it the attention. Boutique cannabis can be over 30% consistently because you only have a couple of plants to mind.
Right.
But as you scale up, so that's why I asked if he was a boutique grower, because that was very potent weed.
Well, yeah, he's very careful with his rooms, and he's actually a consultant for a lot of people for creating spaces that are normally, I think he has like single strain rooms, and
he respects the plant and the space she needs to be successful. So
and he's very into, he's amazing. And I was really honored that he helped me out with this project, because like it was a financial ask too. Like,
yeah,
you have to give it to me if you can.
The labs that participated, did they do the testing for free?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Good.
And I was also really lucky with that, but I had to give up the blindness of the study in order to make that happen.
Why?
Because there was no way for me to get the sample to them without them asking for payment. They normally wanted like payment right there, payment.
Right.
Well, if I'm going to be like, well, that you're going to test this for free, I didn't have the money up front, you know?
Okay. So they knew who they were testing?
Yeah. And that's what kind of sucked about it, is they did know that it was me. What I would love to do is see somebody do an actual proficiency test, but the people who I've read about doing that gave a lot of accolades to a very, very cheating lab. And I was bummed that experiment doesn't work out well. Like there's some flaws with proficiency testing and the lab systems, and like the realities of dropping off a sample, because I tried to like quietly, like surreptitiously, like just here's some cash, but they like ask a lot of questions, and eventually it comes out, you know?
Well, but they didn't know what grower made the cannabis, right? They just knew you. Okay, that's perfect then. So
they didn't know anything. I gave them 3 little, like basically just 3 little pill jars. I had already homogenized the samples. I got some
that was my other question.
Homogenize it.
Why did you want to homogenize them?
I wanted to homogenize them because I wanted to control for that, because almost every lab says our homogenization process is special because ... So I got different homogenization processes on all 3 samples.
So if you standardize that part of it, then you knew whatever flower that you acquired from these growers was going to be mixed up perfectly. So there wasn't going to be like one bud that was tested for the potency, and that excuse would be then void.
That's why I had the pictures of the plates, is because I wanted people to see like, no, everybody got this. I wanted to make it as fair as a person with a limited budget and limited scientific knowledge could do, to show my readers like you can trust labs. The results were interesting.
Well, yeah, exactly. So now I understand the homogenizing of the product, because I was confused. I was like, wouldn't you want them to homogenize their own sample? That way you could pick out the people that maybe choose to, but you're right.
Yeah, I
at
was
this point,
trying to
they
like
knew
control
you
for
were on a
that.
mission. You were on a
Yeah.
mission. They knew you were going to be dropping off samples, so they were going to mind their P's and Q's. I really would be surprised if anybody inflated or manipulated anything.
Right.
But
So what were you trying to assess then? Because obviously if
potency.
they know that they're not, that you're giving it to them as a test, so they're not going to, they're going to do their best with
Okay,
it.
so on their best day, how good is the science? How exact is cannabis science? Can it hit close to these numbers? And if you look in, I think most of the time, yeah. Like I think if you have an honest lab with honest, yeah.
Lab 4 had a little bit of trouble because their numbers were significantly higher, but the range between inner lab when someone's watching you, which is your character, right? Like what you do when nobody's looking versus when someone's watching you. So they knew someone was watching them, and everybody was within a reasonable uncertainty measurement of one another. So almost like perfect and how it should be, except for lab 4.
Except for
what
lab
happened with
4?
lab 4?
Well, lab 4 was an interesting case study. It was a blind case, and lab 4 in particular was a very troubled lab.
I think I know what they did based off of the data. I looked it over all day. I think the linear versus quadratic calibration curve is what was causing their low potency flower to be higher and their high potency derivatives to be even with the rest of them.
Interesting. Yeah, they are an interesting, and I felt that of all of the lab tests that I did, because I like posted this result to a subreddit that was, dedicated to Oregon cannabis, and I said, what do you guys think? And everyone except for 2 people, and I got like 70 responses in my direct messages, everyone wanted to know, where can I buy the high scoring cannabis? Only 2 people asked me, who are the labs I can trust? Which told me a lot about the consumer dimension of this problem too, is that there's a big consumer education, consumer component of like, I only smoke 35% weed.
Oh, of course. Justin, as a physician, how difficult is it for you when a patient comes in and they're like, okay, thank you for my rec. Where should I go buy weed? And the good, bad, the ugly, the down and dirty of this industry. How much difficulty is that to try and be unbiased with a patient when you know that there's certain players out there that are just horrible?
Lying liars.
I only know a little bit, right? Because this is not public knowledge to know that. And it's not like you really tell me that much.
I don't tell you anything.
So
I don't tell you specifics of anything.
So how do I really know like who the bad players are in that respect?
Well, do you know which growers in our market are transparent with patients? Do you know which ones are very easily going to provide a COA to your patient?
I know some of them. I know some. I can name, like I think at least 4, if not 5.
Out of 22 growers?
Well, I'm not saying the other ones don't, right? I don't go to them and ask for the COAs myself. So it's only if I've had reps come in and I ask them those questions and they're like, oh yeah, like like Grow Healthy, they always have a COA right there, and VitaCan always has their COA right there.
Yeah, they're pretty transparent. I'll give them that. Even but as a physician, the responsibility that they put on you to make sure that you're making these recommendations to patients efficiently and accurately, but like with extra scrutiny if you do anything or deviate. Don't you feel an adverse like responsibility if they medicate with somebody that's not safe and you have no idea?
Well, it's problematic because, I tell people there are, 3 great reasons that they're getting it legally. One is that it's legal, so they're not doing something illegally now. 2, I'm going to skip to 3 actually. 3 is that, they know, for example, they can, if they want to look at the terpenes, they can look at the terpenes, or if they just want to know specifically what they were using, so they have that repeatability and consistency, and they can really use it as a medication. And number 2, and this is where I always feel guilty, is I'm like, and every end batch product is tested, third-party tested by by independent labs and certified so that you're not getting something that's contaminated with molds, heavy metals, pesticides,
But that's where you really don't
fentanyl.
know.
And
That's where
that's
you
where I
don't
feel
know.
guilty, because I'm like, well, at least it's supposed to be like that.
It's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So as much as, I mean, I would never, ever blame the physicians in the slightest, but I do feel like that's a lot of unknowns. If anything, every COA in the state should go to you or be available to you so that you can look at it and say, because patients, I can't expect to teach every 800,000 patients how to read a COA, but I can teach a handful of doctors how to read a COA to their patients. And then if you have access to all of them, that's as transparent as it gets.
But you shouldn't
But then
have,
you've got doctors that just don't give a crap.
but
and
you
it's-
shouldn't even, it shouldn't be dependent on the doctors reading every COA of all of the labs. It
No,
should
just
just
having
be,
them
the
available.
state should be regulating it so that,
I don't understand why they're not available to consumers. I mean, I don't know
Well,
what's
it
so
once
precious
was.
on there.
So the language in the law back in the day once said, you must, and then they had some lobbyists switch it to you may. So the may versus must argument of 2016, 2017, I think it was every MMTC must provide the QR code to the supporting documents of a COA proving legitimacy, accuracy, and compliance of their medicine. Then they switched to you may provide a QR code, blah, 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 blah. So some have chosen to do like summary reports, which is just page 1 and page 2, terpene profile, potency, and just says pass, 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 pass. And then some choose to do all 7 pages where you might be looking at a little bit of lead or a little bit of a solvent left over, but not above the action level, taking that chance with patients that might not understand what they're looking at and saying, oh, there's lead all up in my medicine. And then there's people that just don't. They choose not to. They make you jump through hoops. They say, call corporate to get your COA. You call corporate, they put you on hold till you hang up, kind of like their SOP.
Which labs or which not labs, which growers, dispensaries will do that? I mean, you're not giving away anything.
I'm going to tell you, I'll do a figure. How about that? We have 22 licensed growers in the state, right? We've got 20 of them that are actively producing medicine, maybe 19. Out of those 19, to get a COA is similar to pulling teeth from half of them. Half of them. And the other half, you can look at the COA when you're purchasing, but you can't have it available. And a portion of them only give you the summary page. They won't give you all 7 pages. The rest of them, it's like, that's our IP. We're not sharing that with anybody. They'll make up excuses, and then they don't have to provide it to patients.
So let's make it easy. Who are those select few that give the entire COA happily to the patients in the state of Florida?
Entire COA, not many.
Or everything
Summary.
pertinent.
That doesn't, before I say that doesn't really mean much if the laboratory is not giving them data that is accurate. So that's why we circle all the way back to why Jamie had started being so vocal about everything in Oregon is the grower at this point, they've done their steps. They grew it, they harvested it, they sent it off to the lab. And then they realized that there's a loophole and labs will do pretty much whatever it takes to get your business. And so that means manipulating data, inflating numbers. So then the one document that's supposed to ensure safety is now void, moot, pointless, a waste of paper, not necessary, not relevant, and not helping patients.
GIGO, it's just garbage. So you put garbage all over.
Garbage in, garbage out.
And like the other thing that I found out, so I got a second like data set from the state of Oregon because I wanted to answer, is there lab shopping? And you made that point about IP. So Oregon went through, they tried to de-identify as much as possible. They de-identified farm names, so I couldn't see which farms were going to what de-identified, labs. But the thing they didn't de-identify was the strain name. So from the strain name, I took the strain name and I just started calling dispensaries who tested this. Oh, thanks. And so I de-identified my own data set. And then I turned around and I told the state of Oregon, I have some findings for you. I think you need to understand that your THC indicates you definitely have some cheating labs. I see these breakpoints in your data around 20. I see behaviors on labs that are skewing their results higher than 20%. And then you can also see business falling to those labs. And also, you don't know how to de-identify a data set. And I literally have not heard anything from that.
Well, it's an interesting point, because as the volume increases for labs that come online after the fact, and you see the volume decrease in more established labs, it's like, wait, our lab, are we like, should we be taking pointers from this guy? Because apparently he can run like 5-10 percentage points higher. He's doing things way faster than we've ever done it in
Yeah,
24 hours.
he can do it in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, this guy knows how to do it. And he's cutting me lower on pricing and turnaround time. It's like, wow, we should really just shut everything down, start from scratch again, because obviously we're not doing it right. But those data points, maybe percentage of failure by volume data, should be out public. Look at all the labs that are licensed. How many of them fail a product?
I'm putting together another data request to the state of Oregon, because I'm just all addicted to their data now, and I gotta know.
Yeah, you just love it.
And I do want to know their past failure rates, especially Oregon had that problem with this lab that was passing tests that they were literally physically incapable of running, which is just the most egregious thing that I can think of to do. How many times are things like that happening? And then Oregon, why is your answer only to take their license for 32 days? That
I've made a table that I will share with you that is like my baby. It's a table of every lab punishment since the inception of a legal cannabis testing program. It's near and dear to my heart.
Beautiful.
It's not. It's actually very disturbing, but I broke it down by market and by lab, and I took what they did, what the punishment was, what the fine was it their first, second, third offense, who was operating as a lab director and who was the managing partner. And then, oh, trust me, I got really
you and I are cut from the same cloth.
I feel like we are. So what I noticed about halfway through this list, and at this point, when I started it, I was just collecting the lab news that was available to the public. So it was a lot of Nevadas, it was a lot of Michigans and Arizonas and Californias in there, and a touch of Florida, but there was, the Praxis up in Washington, but the states that don't have open records laws, I couldn't get their info yet. But I was about halfway through before I realized that there were managing partners, individuals, whatever, that once they got suspended or revocation of their license, they would just open up a new lab.
Yeah,
same
they would
management.
Just,
and then they got in trouble again.
It's insane. Like when I was reading some of this stuff, I had to take a break from it because it just kept eating my life. Like I would dump 20, 30 hours a week into calling laboratories, calling the state, trying to arrange testing, trying to scrounge up another data set, taking stuff out of PDFs on the website and putting it into like a usable format, because a lot of state requests is getting data in terrible formats because they don't want you to have it in case they're doing stuff wrong. It's been a real crazy adventure. I just wanted to know why they discontinued my Lime OG.
So again, why would a state that is charged with protecting all of the people of that state, why would they not be jumping all over this? And it's the same with Florida. They've gone through great lengths to supposedly make things better for people, which they're doing the opposite by limiting how much you can get and making it rolling limits instead, and making it very difficult in that respect. But what they could really do to make sure that everyone was protected and to help people, of course, is make sure that at least what they're getting is actually a safe product.
Well, that was one of Jamie's points, was that every market that has a testing program needs to have an unbiased third party unrelated, not financially driven verification lab.
That's a fix for it, but why is the state
You're
not
asking why
super
would the
interested?
state, why is the state not doing anything? So I think that there could be a few reasons. Like, I'm not a prognosticator of why government entities don't
Well,
do
I
their
just want your
jobs.
opinion.
But here are a few things that I think
Here's
after
some,
just talking. Here's some things that I think.
just a
So
few notes.
So the first thing, I think that ORLAP and OLCC is a bit out of their depth. I don't think that they understood the exact, like the Oregon was a trailblazer, right? They did not understand what they were getting into. ORLAP particularly did not understand what testing would look like if there were economic drivers around a positive result as opposed to a negative result. Like ORLAP is used to people saying that's not in the water, not we want more of this in it. So I think that first they didn't really understand how a market like cannabis would work. And so I worry about them with psilocybin. I think another reason a state might do this, it's not true in the case of Oregon, but other states might do it because they might be open to litigation. You didn't protect us. You did not protect businesses from being driven out of business by these nefarious business practices. I believe
Or
in the
vice
case,
versa. The
right,
business is suing, saying that you targeted us because we were cannabis and you put us
right.
out of business, although everybody was doing it. Why'd you punish us? They do get punished on internally for making it look like they are thwarting the industry or creating barriers if they do enforce.
Right. And I think that the industry has been wholly thoughtless on this issue because what regulators are mainly driven by is ensuring that cannabis doesn't go to the black market. They
That's all they care
honestly,
about.
they don't care about stoners, okay? Like, because another article title could be, cannabis regulator versus stoners, because they really don't care about consumer protection as much as they care about ensuring that there's no black market diversion of product. So you look at Metric, it's not set up as a system to really look at these types of reporting things. It's set up to track a plant from seed to sale. Its obsession is that this doesn't get in the hands of kids. They're just not interested in it.
Right. And I mean, Justin, if you think about it, Florida's the same. We don't even have a seed to sale tracking software here. So
Right.
we don't know where it's going, but we just want to take extra steps to make sure we don't think it's going to the black market, even though black market weed is way cheaper than Florida. 65 and eighth is going to be hard to kind of get
Wow.
back in the black market, but
Mm.
they do keep us from actually buying medicine.
We basically have a small secret committee here in Florida that makes all of the rules, and they don't consult with any experts. They don't consult with the scientists. They don't consult with physicians.
Where do they meet, Justin?
I don't know. They don't tell. They don't have to publish it because they're under an emergency rulemaking process,
Everything.
and so nothing has to be
Oh,
published. They can make
emergency.
decisions overnight without any explanation as to why they made it, and
They don't have to
they-
justify their
they-
numbers on
Okay.
caps of daily limits. As long as we're in emergency rulemaking, to Justin's point, they can implement whichever section that they want to, and then some at their convenience. And right now, they've only implemented the parts that keep patients from accessing medicine like we should be able to. Like
Right. Well, because
limits
that's
and
what they're
caps and-
because that's what they think that the crime is that people are accessing cannabis. Like, that's why I think that all of this stuff at the state is going on, is because there is still in the mindsets of everyone that this is a crime, that this isn't something that should
drug.
be allowed, that this is something that, oh, these lucky stoners got this through. Like, there's this bias against cannabis users. And, if they cared about cannabis users, if the government cared about us, they would protect us from being drug tested for cannabis, for like
banking and-
employment of yeah, I can't get a bank account to write copy about cannabis. Literally all I do is try to educate consumers about it and like sell my writing. I can't get a bank that'll work for me for that. If they really cared about cannabis consumers, that's
Right.
where we would see a lot of
Although
action.
if you are on the opposition and you are educating solely on not using cannabis, those people,
Correct.
the Marthas, they get all the banking. And all they
Correct.
do is talk about how cannabis is shit. And that's not true. So I don't believe it's a drug, but yet they still do treat us. I always compared it to like when you're younger and you're growing up and your mom's like, okay, you can have some alcohol, but you're going to do it here at home. You're going to just take a little and I'm going to keep an eye on you. That's what they did with cannabis. They're
Yep.
like, here, take a little, do it here at home. Don't go out of state with it. And I'm going to keep an eye on you. And then
Yeah.
I'm going to take it away because, you know, it's just very
I
like
think you've had enough.
hypocritical, you know, to say, okay, we think cannabis is medicine, but we don't want you to have your medicine, you know,
Yeah.
and you don't be taking too many Tums at once.
And we don't want you to have
It's
safely
gluttonous.
tested medicine. We don't want you to be sure that like what you're taking is safe. We don't want you to know what's in it.
So
You just, you know, like
pharmaceuticals, Justin, do you have in pharmaceuticals because you are a general practitioner as well as a cannabis recommending physician, but do they have regulations on how much of an active ingredient can be in a pharmaceutical without there being and a standard like deviation up or down? I think Justin might be frozen.
he might be frozen.
Or he's
Well,
thinking really hard. So I know that for a generic to be generically equivalent, there has to be a certain amount of the active ingredient and all of
Right.
that. And if that's medicine and this is medicine, then why isn't the state more cognizant of the active ingredient of THC in our quote medicine?
That's what I wanted to know. And what I tried to talk to like my state representative, this guy named Steve Lively. I said, look, you should care. You sit on this OLCC committee.
Right.
Would you care if you went to buy gasoline and you got a different octane? Yes, you
I would care. Yeah. I'd be
Yes.
pretty mad. But how
You'd
would
be
I
pretty
know?
mad.
There is
Right.
an agency there, you know, there's the Department of Ag commissioner that goes and they check the scales to make sure I'm getting the proper amount of meat at the store. And they check the
Right.
scales to make sure that I'm, you know, or the pumps to make sure I'm getting the proper amount of gas dispensed for the money I pay. They're checking all that, but they don't check the potency on the weed that I inhale.
Well, and then here's where it gets a little worse, right? So I think back to the seamstresses of yore, back before there were measuring
Because you
tapes.
sew.
Because I sew, and that's how
Okay.
I think, right? And so they would take a ribbon or a piece of string and they would
Yeah.
measure things with the ribbon or piece of string. They didn't have inches or rulers
Yeah.
or anything like that. So then along come measuring tapes, right? Well, they are basically like, no, we have measuring tapes, but we want you to go back to measuring potency with string, because they won't describe which, you know, analytic standards they should be using. They won't describe sampling methods. They won't describe like a chain of custody that ensures that it's the laboratory that owns the sample from the farm and is the one that takes it from that. Like it's absolute insanity. It's like they've designed this thing to tell as little as possible.
Well, some of the trailblazers of the industry are finding out now that their program was not as perfect as they thought. And, you know, it just sucks that the patients are the one that they get R&D'd on, you know, they're R&D'ing on us as patients and the community of cannabis users that know that it's not going to kill us. It's not going to hurt our families. It's not going to cause me to go and commit murder on someone's face. You know, I'm not going to go and beat my wife or something. I'm saying cannabis stoners don't hurt anybody, and cannabis hasn't hurt anyone.
Well,
It's not
and
going to kill you. Peanuts
and
will
I
kill
want to
you.
keep it that
Ketchup will
way.
kill you. And yeah, but it could actually hurt you if you don't know what's in it. And there could be things
Correct.
that are in there.
And
So
I really worry with like the Delta 8 and like the
no.
alt cannabinoids.
No. Other episode, because if I get into that, then my blood pressure goes up, and the judge says if I get angry again and enraged that I need to do my breathing exercises because that's what kept me out of jail.
I'm a pulmonaut as well, so I get you.
Dude,
but
Delta
testing
8 and franken-cannabinoids are not. We'll do another episode about it because I have strong opinions on those. But I think
I've been asked to like
everything.
investigate by some like readers of mine that were like, could you tell me what's going on with hemp testing? And I'm like,
yes.
Wow.
Well, I love that you're a voice of reason. You're a voice of the patients, that you have your give a damn intact and you're still not afraid. You're not backing down. I will help you get the the information that you want to get from the markets that seem to be a little bit more closed-lipped. But we can together, I think we can like fight crime and then also get public records requests fulfilled efficiently.
Yes.
Which is very odd for a tag team group of, superheroes. But I really am glad you were able to join us today on the show. And
Thank you
I
so
think
much.
that having you back on, especially in a couple of weeks after some movement happens in some different markets, to get your perspective would be awesome. And
Would love
I
to
will
come back.
shout out to Trent for connecting us, because Trent Hancock is like the loudest voice in Oregon. But now I'm thinking he might be the second loudest next to
He
you,
is
girl.
he is absolutely amazing and inspiring, and like the amount of like work that he has done to just keep
Absolutely.
getting people to like, because it feels like you're shouting into a void in Oregon. People just don't, they're like, we've got what we want, we can all get high, and
But he started just like you in Oregon, but his passion got so much bigger than he is. It got so much bigger than that state. And people are listening in other markets, and they're starting to
that's
lean
where I
in.
am. That's
And
where
that's
I
good.
am. Is that this is such a big conversation. There are so
Yes.
many lessons learned. And I used to work with data in healthcare. Like I published a paper on data in pediatrics, where I worked with multi-hospital data, and we tried to figure out if patients were getting sicker by, a whole bunch of different things we monitored from their pediatric electronic health record. So I've seen things like this work. We've done it in healthcare.
We can't answer that question right now with cannabis. Did we make somebody sicker? Did we kill someone?
Yeah, we
Did
can't
harm
answer.
someone?
We can't answer, did we make them sicker, much less can we make them better? And like, we are failing cannabis science as long as we
Yeah.
leave these questions unanswered. And we owe it more to the plant,
Yeah,
It
I mean,
deserves
trying
good
to
science.
legitimize the industry and trying to legitimize and kind of take that stigma and lift it off the plant and just be like, okay, see, not going to hurt anybody. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tough questions that we have to ask. And it's got to be industry professionals that reflect on it, because we have to accept the fact that we may have made mistakes with the
And
programs
it's
we
okay.
implemented.
It's absolutely okay to make mistakes. I think that there's this over obsession with everything has to be perfect. And like, no,
Vertical
that's not how
integration. Yeah,
that's not how
all of that.
learning happens. Learning
Yeah.
happens by, you try to make as few mistakes on people as possible, but when you do, you just try to make it right. It's disappointing to see people resist trying to make it right, and it's all over. Like, they just don't want to admit, maybe that rule was a little harsh. Maybe we didn't think about how enforcement was going to look.
Maybe we shouldn't have put you in jail for cannabis, so we'll let you out.
Right. Like the people who have gone to jail because they were hauling cannabis instead of hemp. My heart hurts for those people.
Yeah, that was an episode that we Justin and I tackled a couple of weeks ago, where it's just looks like a step in the right direction, but when you really break it down, it's like, who are you saving? Who are you protecting? What wrongs are you righting? And it's really just lip service.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, we're going to get there incrementally. It'll be a slow
Yes.
pace, but I'm so glad you were able to join us on the show. And I hope that, you keep fighting the good fight. If you need anything, you will call, and we'll have you back on to touch base after a little bit to get your perspective on some of these litigations that are going on. So I
Awesome,
will
yeah.
sign off. This was an honor. Justin, you went somewhere, but you're back now. And
I had a near-death
Huston
experience.
Savis. Justin Davis is now Huston Savis. Is that your
Huston
OnlyFans
Savis.
page name?
I don't even know how it did that. Houston Savis.
Is that is that like Dawn Atlantis for Rick DeSantis, or for Ron DeSantis is Dawn Atlantis?
I've never written that in my life. I don't know how
And
it's
Justin
Wow.
Davis is Huston Savis on OnlyFans.
I'd like to say it's Houston, though. I'm pretty sure it's Houston.
It's
Houston.
whatever the hell you
Houston.
want it to be.
Houston
Yeah.
Okay.
Savis.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, do
that
your
seems right.
Yeah, with a little thing, 2 dots over the U. Why don't you do your sign off, because now that you've joined us, the podcast is over.
It was like I was at the gates of heaven, and they were beckoning. I was like, no, I have to get back to the podcast. Cynthia will kill me if I don't get back, please. And so they send me back. Thank you.
They sent back Huston, and we're happy to have you, but you're getting to the tail end. So I'm signing off for Cynthia Brewer, this marijuana mind. We will talk to you guys next week. And my ambiguously amazing.
This is
Justin.
this is Justine Savis and Jamie Toth. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Scintillating as we would have expected. Now we know that there are two Nancy Drews in this world. If you two were to collaborate, you could bring down anybody.
Yeah, and we're on different coasts, so we could like this. We go right back to the beginning, fighting
the middle.
crime, and then also smoking weed and taking down big companies and righting wrongs. I don't know. We're gonna come up with a
Protecting
team name.
stoners. Yeah.
She can sew, and so we'll have outfits before the end of the
Oh
day.
my Lord, will we have outfits?
Spandex, lycra, glitter, everything.
Hey,
And
count me in.
Justin,
Justine is in.
Christine loves
Yes.
the spandex and the lycra. Awesome. Thank you again, Jamie. And we
Thank
will
you
talk
so
to
much.
next week. Go ahead,
Talk to you soon.
Jay Davis.
Keeping it lean, keeping it green.
And
Justine
going through puberty
Savis.
for the first time again on the show.
Justine Savis. I see you next week. I love you all. I love you.
It's like a Eastern European meets El Salvadorian. I don't really know what's happening. This is